Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Toromona. The Toromona are a group of people who are indigenous to Bolivia, and they live near the upper Madidi River, which is a part of the Amazon basin, and the Heath River in the northwestern area of Bolivia. There hasn't been any notable contact with this tribe aside from other indigenous tribes, but this tribe was talked about a lot when a Norwegian biologist searched specifically for this tribe for many years before he mysteriously disappeared in the region of the Madidi Park in 1997. This tribe has remained quite isolated, and the most recent known sighting in the 21st century was when the Arona people of Bolivia informed an anthropologist named Michael Brohan that they had contacted a group that was in voluntary isolation on the eastern bank of the Marini River. It wasn't confirmed that this was the Toromona tribe, but it is believed that that's who they saw. Thankfully, in 2006, Bolivia's administrative resolution created an exclusive, reserved, and untouchable portion of the Madidi National Park in order to protect the Toromona and their desires to be uncontacted. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Kawahiva. The Kawahiva peoples used to be referred to as the Rio Pardo Indians, and they are an uncontacted tribe that resides in Mato Grosso, Brazil. This group is definitely nomadic people, and so most of what we know about them comes from the things they leave behind when moving to a new place, such as arrows, baskets, hammocks, and their communal houses. It is unclear exactly when the Kawahiva people became a tribe, as our knowledge of their modern existence began in 1999, but it is believed that this group goes as far back as the 1700s. As I mentioned before, they live in communal houses, and they use a primitive form of a spinning wheel in order to make string, and they use tree bark to make nets. It is very rare for a non-indigenous group to have a sighting of the Kawahiva, and neighboring tribes refer to them as either tiny people or redheads. It is believed that loggers in the area have intentionally tried to keep the Kawahiva on the run, and it is speculated by the human rights group Survival International that the women of the tribe have stopped giving birth. It is unclear exactly how many Kawahiva people there are left, but it is estimated to be around 4 separate Kawahiva bands, with maybe around 15 people in each band. Like many of the tribes on today's list, their existence is always threatened by deforestation, illegal logging, and just attempts to either kill or enslave them. In 2001, the tribe's land was put under local protection, but that protection was periodically removed by the courts before being later reinstated. And in 2012, the land was turned into an official reservation. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Caraballo. The Caraballo are a group of uncontacted people who live in the Rio Pure National Park in the southeastern corner of Colombia. The Caraballo live in at least 3 longhouses, which are usually narrow, single-room houses. They share this national park with both the Pasay and the Jumana peoples. In the last 400 years, there has been outsider contact with the Caraballo people, but not much, as the contact usually involves violent attacks by slave traders and rubber extractors, which has only increased their desire for isolation, which makes a lot of sense. It is believed that these people may refer to themselves as the Yakumo, and there truly isn't much that is known about them, which honestly is probably a good thing. In December of 2001, the president, Juan Manuel Santos, signed Legal Decree number 4633, which was designed to guarantee uncontacted peoples rights to their voluntary isolation, their traditional territories, and even reparations if they face violence from outsiders, which really is such a great thing. While this decree alone, of course, isn't going to stop some people from illegal contact, it is nice to see that steps are being made to protect these people. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Namole, or the Namol. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this one. The Namole people are an indigenous tribe of nomadic hunter-gatherers who inhabit the remote regions of a national park in Peru, which is part of the Amazon rainforest. They are more commonly referred to as the Mashco Piro peoples, but that name was first used in 1687 to refer to those who are native to Peru, but it's actually considered a derogatory term considering the word Mashco means savages. In 1998, there was estimated to be around 100 to 250 members of this tribe, which was a welcomed increase from the 1976 estimate of somewhere from 20 to 100. The Namale peoples have actively avoided any contact with non-indigenous people, and truly, who could blame them? In 1894, most of this tribe was slaughtered by the private army of Carlos Fitzgerald, who was a rubber baron. Those who survived this attack retreated to the most remote forest areas where they could be safe. In the 21st century, there's been an increase in the sightings of people from this tribe, but they certainly still are not actively seeking any contact with the outside world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Dalala. The Dalala are an indigenous people of Brazil living in the lower Vale do Javari in the western Amazon basin. These peoples are split into 2 groups, one splinter group led by a woman named Maya that is around 23 people, while the larger main group is around 150 people. The split between the groups came from a dispute between around 20 members, and while the larger group remains quite isolated, the smaller group has had some infrequent contact with neighboring settlements. The hunting and war weapon of choice of this tribe is the club, but they are also known to use poison darts. Both the men and women of this tribe paint themselves with red dye that is made from plants. There is little that is known about the religious or spiritual practices, but it is known that they live in communal huts, which is something that is different from many of the uncontacted tribes on today's list. This tribe is more often referred to as the Korubo people, but apparently this name was given to them by a former enemy tribe and is said to be negative and degrading, which is why we will be referring to them by the less common name of Dalala. This tribe's biggest struggle in terms of illness and death at the moment seems to be malaria. This tribe has a long history with the massacres of indigenous peoples, so it makes sense that they want to remain isolated and have not welcomed outside contact very much since the 1950s. In 1996, there began expeditions to try and make peaceful contact, but the Dalala are known to kill trespassers on their land, which we truly cannot blame them for, and the most recent incident of this nature came in 2000 when 3 lumbermen were killed near the native reservation. It definitely serves as a reminder to leave people who don't want to be contacted alone. If they want our influence, they know where to find us. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Aoreo. The Aoreo people are the indigenous people of Gran Chaco, and they live in both Bolivia as well as Paraguay. There are approximately 5,600 Aoreo peoples, and while many of them ended up becoming sedentarized by missionaries in the 20th century, there are around 100 people who have still maintained the traditional nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle and remain uncontacted. The Aoreo were first contacted by Jesuits in the 1720s to try and convert people to Catholicism, and in the 1740s the mission was abandoned and the Aoreo were luckily left alone. Until the 1900s. The Chaco War between Bolivia and Paraguay brought in 100,000 troops to the territory as well as all of the diseases they carried. Both countries saw the Aoreo as a problem, and from the 1940s to the 1970s there was a rule where a Paraguayan soldier could be freed from service by killing one of them. At this time, Aoreo children were also being stolen, and one 12-year-old was even put on display in an exhibit. In the 1940s and 50s, the work of missionaries continued, and in the late 50s, missionaries used force and manipulation to remove the Aoreo from their land to various mission stations, and the land where they once lived was sold for cattle farming. These mission stations forced the Aoreo living in them to give up their culture, including their religion, appearance, music, and diet, and missionaries sometimes convinced the Aoreo living at the missions to find uncontacted Aoreo in the forest to sedentarize and convert them. And in December of 1986, that unsurprisingly turned out to be a horrible idea that led to 5 deaths. The Aoreo people who are in contact now are struggling with both poverty as well as discrimination, and the uncontacted Aoreo have 6 main threats, which are cattle farming and deforestation, sale and allocation of their territory, searches for oil, missionaries seeking contact, illegal collection of territory resources, and violation of territory by various groups. I could dive into each of these points and discuss why they are such a threat to these people, but I'll leave that for your homework because we have got to keep this list moving right along. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Tagari. The Tagari are an eastern Huaorani people living in the Ecuadorian Amazon basin. This group was once a part of the Huaori families, but they separated off in 1968 after refusing missionary settlement, and since then have lived in isolation. Their name comes from one of their members' tag. There haven't been many interactions interactions since then with other Huaorani, but the interactions that have happened are often met with violence. It is estimated that there are around 20 to 30 surviving Tagari, and they are one of the 2 remaining indigenous groups living in voluntary isolation in Ecuador. These people are semi-nomadic and live off hunting and gathering as well as a few crops. Since 2007, there has been a national policy to try and help protect them that includes untouchability, self-determination, equality, and no contact. The threats to the Tagari include illegal loggers of tropical hardwood, foreign disease, smugglers, settlers, and oil companies moving into the area with drilling taking place all over their land. In 2008, investigations began into reports that 5 Tagari people had been killed by illegal loggers. As we get closer to the end of our list, it becomes abundantly clear that many of these isolated tribes face extremely similar threats, which is quite interesting and unfortunately extremely unsurprising. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Taromanane. Remember in the last point about the Tagari how I mentioned that they were one of the last 2 uncontacted tribes in Ecuador? Well, this is the other one. These people live in the Yasuni National Park in the Ecuadorian Amazon basin, and this tribe also has some distant relations to the Huaorani people. There's estimated to be around 150 to 300 people in this tribe who maintain their nomadic lifestyle in the rainforest. While, like everyone else on their list, 2 of their main threats are oil developments and illegal loggers, the Taromanane have another more unexpected threat, and that is the Huaorani. In 2013, more than 20 of these people were killed by the Huaorani, which left 2 child survivors who were taken as hostages. Apparently the people who took part in this terrible tragedy bragged about it on national television at first, calling themselves brave for attacking and taking the lives of unarmed people with rifles, pistols, and long spears, and even went as far as selling photos of it to the highest bidder. There's so much to cover in regards to this one incident that I unfortunately don't have time for, but the whole situation is extremely tragic and just downright horrible. Much of these disputes stem from the land that they share because of the fact that the Taromanane have been pushed deeper into the forest from the Huaorani, allowing oil companies to drill on the land. It of course is a very complicated issue that has so much more to it. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Awa, are a group of people living in the eastern Amazon rainforest. There are around 350 living members, but not all of them remain uncontacted. Out of the 350, it is believed that around 100 members continue to try to remain uncontacted, although it unfortunately hasn't been as easy as it should for them. The Awa were once settled people but began to live a more nomadic lifestyle around the 1800s in order to try and escape incursions by Europeans. They were further threatened by settlers who cleared out most of the forests on their land. In 1982, the Brazilian government received a loan of $900 million from the World Bank and the European Union, but under a condition that the lands of certain indigenous peoples, including the Awa, be protected. This should have been the key to helping protect these peoples, considering their lives were continually being threatened. There were many cases of tribespeople being killed by settlers, and the forest on which they depended was being destroyed by logging and land clearance for farming. Unfortunately, it took the government over 20 years to actually act on this condition, and finally in March of 2003, the Awa's land was finally distinguished. And to make matters a little worse for these peoples, there are always people who won't respect their land no matter what laws are in place. In late 2011, illegal loggers burned an 8-year-old Awa girl alive after she wandered out of her village, and a leader from another group of people said that the girl had been killed as a warning to other native peoples living in the protected area. According to the human rights organization that campaigns for the rights of indigenous tribal peoples, Survival International, the Awa are the Earth's most threatened tribe. The Awa forests are still disappearing faster than any other area in the Brazilian Amazon, and loggers still remain as their biggest threat. No industry or amount of money is worth these people's lives and their way of life, and serious action to protect them needs to be taken before it's too late. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Man of the Hole. This one is quite different from the others on this list because not only is this only one man, but we don't actually know the name of the tribe that he belongs to. It is believed that he may be the last known survivor of his people, who were probably all killed by cattle ranchers, which is absolutely devastating. Because of the fact that we do not know his name, what tribe he belongs to, or even what language he speaks, his nickname, the Man of the Hole, comes from the large holes he digs, which are created to trap animals as well as a place for him to hide, but it is also believed that these holes may have had a spiritual significance to the tribe that he belongs to. His isolated existence first became known in 1996, and it is believed that the other members of his tribe were killed in a number of clashes between the 1980s and the 1990s. One expert explains that, quote, "He should not be seen as a recluse hiding from society. The man is the survivor of genocide. He didn't choose to live alone." He lives in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, and in 2007 the Brazilian government declared that the 31 square mile area around him would be off limits to trespassing and development, and an additional 11.5 square miles was later added to that. He is often monitored from afar in order to prevent any unwelcome guests from entering his land, but despite these attempts, he was still attacked by gunmen in 2009 and thankfully managed to survive like the warrior that he absolutely is. He maintains avoiding contact with others, although he does know that he is being monitored. The Brazilian government's protection agency, FUNAI, will periodically leave him gifts of tools and seeds, and he will sometimes signal to observing teams so as to warn them of the holes he dug, so it seems as though there's some sort of trust that has been built there, which really is a nice thing to hear. In 2018, the FUNAI released a video of him with the intention of raising global awareness of the threats that face the uncontacted peoples in Brazil, and he appeared as though he may be somewhere in his 50s, but seemed in very good health.
Coming in at our number 10 spot, Funai Agent. Located in the Amazonian jungle, the Caribou tribe is estimated to have a population of roughly 150 people and are definitely not a tribe to visit. While there have been previous successful attempts at making contact with the Caribou people, on August 2nd, 1997, a member of Brazil's Funai Agency, which is a government group dedicated to the protection of isolated communities, attempted to make contact with the group, trying to establish peaceful relations with the community. But this man would not make it out alive. In fact, in over a decade, the Funai lost 7 of its men in an attempt to make contact with the Caribou people, and finally decided they would no longer try. The government still provides them with modern immunizations and established their community as a national park in order to halt logging. Not much else is known of the isolated group, as the government will not let any anthropologists visit in fear they may not return. Next up at number 9, Benedict Allen. While on his second trip to visit the Yafo people, a remote Papua New Guinea tribe with little to no contact with the outside world, after being dropped off by a helicopter to the remote land, he trekked for 3 weeks into the forest, hoping to track down the people who he had met years prior in 1988. He did actually eventually find the community once again, but not long after suddenly seemed to have disappeared. And the media outlets had no clue where Allen was, or even if he was still alive. Famously, he said to not come looking for him if he was thought to be missing, though this request was not followed by the media. Now, I will level with you, he was actually eventually found. But he wasn't happy with the outcome, as he insisted he was not lost and did not want to be saved. But ill with malaria, he accepted the help and was flown out to a hospital. Coming in at number 8, 1950s Mennonites. Located in Bolivia and the Paraguay, the Oreo people are a very isolated group. About 5,000 members remain in the community, and while their current threat is deforestation, you also don't want to take your chances visiting this community. Their first known contact with outsiders was way back in the 40s and 50s, when a large group of Mennonite farmers forcibly took their land to raise pigs. Well, as you can imagine, this did not go over well, and many were killed by the Oreo people. Later again, in 1986, a group of missionaries attempting to evangelize the community was not well appreciated, and 5 men did not make it out alive. Long story short, just leave them alone and they'll leave you alone. Next up at number 7, Don Phillips and Bruno Pereira. In an attempt to write a novel on how to help save the Amazonian rainforest, journalist Don Phillips and an indigenous rights activist, Bruno Pereira, headed into the lawless jungle and never returned. After being reported missing for a few weeks, remains of the 2 men were actually found, but who or what killed them in the depths of the jungle is unknown. Some believe it could have been a tribe defending their land, while others have theorized it could have been other intruders, as the two men were writing a novel revealing the dark underbelly of the area. Whatever it was, I think it's safe to say it's best to keep out of the isolated communities, or you run the risk of never being seen again. Next up at number 6, Nicolas Flores. Largely gathered in Peru, the Mashapiro tribe is estimated to have between 100 and 250 members, and they are considered extremely dangerous to any outsider. In 2012, in fact, archaeologist Diego Cortillo visited the isolated community in an attempt to learn and get pictures of the Mashapiro people, which he did, and they were released later in a Survival International. However, it was his local guide, Nicolas Flores, who was found dead 6 days later with bamboo-tipped arrow struck through his heart. Most likely meant as a sign to ward off further intruders, as the clan likely fears being killed by disease or having their communities taken over by outsiders, as has been attempted in the past. Either way, best to just steer clear. Next up at number 5, Riel Franciscado. Now, not too long ago, in June of 2020, a longtime member of FUNAI and an expert of the Amazonian attempted to make contact with the Uru Iwawao territory in Rondonia. His life mission was to protect these people, and though he was known to make successful and peaceful attempts with other communities in the past, this time he would not be so lucky. Likely thought to be an attacker by the local tribe, as is often the case in their experience with many poachers and illegal loggers known to frequent the area. Franciscado was shot through the heart with a bow and arrow and left for dead. A witness claims that Riel cried out and actually pulled the arrow from his chest and began to run away, but not long after collapsed. It seems like no matter what your motives might be, that these people do not want you there, so let's just all agree to stop trying. Next up, at number 4, Alejandro Lavaca and Inez Arango. Located in Ecuador, the Tigray people live a hunting and foraging lifestyle and have long resisted outsiders in their community. Most notably, back in 1987, when a bishop, Alejandro Lavaca, and his sister, Inez Arango, decided to travel to the area in hopes to preach Christianity to the locals. They were dropped off by helicopter and planned to be picked up a few days later, but as I'm sure you've guessed, this would not be the case. A few days went by and the helicopter pilot came back to retrieve the bishop and his sister, only to find them brutally killed, their corpses laid out as a warning sign to intruders. Do not come back. This would not stop people, however, as recently as 2008, a man was found in the area with 9 iron-headed spears jutting out of his stomach. Coming in at number 3, John Allen Cho. Likely the most well-known of the isolated clans, the Sentinelese people live on a wooden island in the Indian Ocean and are fierce protectors of their home. The community made headlines when, in 2018, even though it was and still is illegal to visit this tribe, an American missionary named John Allen Cho ignored all laws and decided he would still visit the indigenous people to spread the word of God. He managed to bribe several fishermen in order to reach the island, and as was completely expected, the Sentinelli assassinated him not too long after his arrival, likely with bows and arrows. All the fishermen that helped Cho in his mission were arrested, and the island remains illegal to all visitors. Next up at number 2, we have Helena Valero. Okay, so this one is kind of cheating because she did in fact return, but this story is so crazy I had to include it on the list. Back in the 1930s, a young girl named Helena Valero was kidnapped at just 13 years old when her family was attacked by a nearby tribe. Helena lived near the Amazon forest with her farmer parents, but once captured was taken to live with a tribe known as Shemateri. Helena accidentally gave poisonous toad eggs to one of the other children, and that child's father found out and threatened to kill her. So she ran away deeper into the forest where she lived for 7 months. Eventually, she ended up reaching a new tribe called the Namote, but was not welcome at first, so once again, she fled back into the woods, believing they were going to kill her. But things took a turn when later she was caught by the head man of the tribe and ended up actually falling in love with and marrying him, becoming his third wife. Years went by and Helena had 2 children with the chief, but sadly, he was killed by an opposing tribe. This threatened Helena and the life of her children. Scared for her and her children's life, she fled with them to another nearby tribe, uninvolved with the feud, and eventually married again. Unlike her previous marriage, however, her second husband was not kind to her, but still she gave him 2 more children. Her life takes a turn when the tribe that killed her first husband relocated near her once again, and Helena, fearing for her life and terribly unhappy in her marriage, escaped to live among white men again. But rather shockingly, upon her return to her previous home, she was rejected by her family and living in poverty and not well taken care of at all. Helena eventually decided life was better among the Yanomami people and returned to live out the remainder of her life there. Coming in our number 1 spot is Michael Rockefeller. Located in South Papua, Indonesia, the Otsjanup village belongs to the Asmat people, and unlike some of the others on this list, they're not actually widely known as being specifically violent or dangerous. In fact, in modern times, while still very isolated, they've been known to seek out higher education and incorporate modern technologies into the village. But in November of 1961, one man would not be so lucky. Michael Rockefeller, the son of famous and incredibly wealthy New York governor, disappeared on an expedition to visit the Asmat people. He was apparently on the trip as he was looking to curate a collection of the local art from the isolated group to bring back to his family's museum in New York. But he would never make it back. Rockefeller was last seen swimming to the shore when his boat overturned, and for years, no one really knew what happened to him. But recently, author Carl Hoffman decided to dive into the tale and see what he could find. He revisited the exact location where Michael traveled all those years ago, and according to the locals he spoke with, they said, quote, "On shore, he saw familiar faces, those of the Otsjanup warriors. Instead of the rescue Rockefeller hoped for, he was stabbed in the ribs by one of the men, fatally killed in the precise actions of ritualistic headhunting and consumed by the warriors."
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Aoreo. The Aoreo people are the indigenous people of the Gran Chaco, and they live in both Bolivia as well as Paraguay. There are approximately 5,600 Aoreo peoples, and while many of them ended up becoming sedentarized by missionaries in the 20th century, there are around 100 people who have still maintained the traditional nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle and remain uncontacted. The Aoreo were first contacted by Jesuits in the 1720s to try and convert people to Catholicism, and in the 1740s the mission was abandoned and the Aoreo people were luckily left alone until the 1900s. The Chaco War between Bolivia and Paraguay brought in 100,000 troops to the territory, as well as all of the diseases that they carried. Both countries saw the Aoreo as a problem, and from the 1940s to the 1970s there was a rule where a Paraguayan soldier could be freed from service by killing an Aoreo. At this time, young Aoreo people were also being stolen, and one was even put on display in an exhibit. In the 1940s and 50s, the work of missionaries continued, and in the late 50s, missionaries used force and manipulation to remove the Aoreo from their land to various mission stations, and the land where they once lived was sold for cattle farming. These mission stations forced the Aoreo people living in them to give up their culture, including their religion, appearance, music, and diet, and missionaries sometimes convinced the Aoreo living at the missions to find other uncontacted Aoreo in the forest to sedentarize and convert, and in December of 1986 that unsurprisingly turned out to be a horrible idea that led to 5 deaths. The Aoreo people who are in contact now are struggling with both poverty as well as discrimination, and the uncontacted Aoreo have 6 main main threats, which are cattle farming and deforestation, sale and allocation of their territory, searches for oil, missionaries seeking contact, illegal collection of territory resources, and violation of territory by various groups. I could dive into each one of these points and discuss why they are such a threat to these people, but I'll leave that for your homework because we've got to keep this list moving right along. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Tagari. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. The Tagari are an eastern Huaorani people living in the Ecuadorian Amazon basin. The group was once a part of the Huaorani families, but they separated off in 1968 after refusing missionary settlement, and since then have lived in isolation. Their name comes from one of their members' tag. There haven't been many interactions since then with other Huaorani, but the interactions that have happened are often met with violence. It is estimated that there are around 20 to 30 surviving Tagari, and they are one of the 2 remaining indigenous groups living in voluntary isolation in Ecuador. These people are semi-nomadic and live off hunting and gathering as well as a few crops. Since 2007, there has been a national policy to try and help protect them that includes untouchability, self-determination, equality, and no contact. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Yanomami. The Yanomami people have been living in the rainforest stretching from southern Venezuela to northern Brazil for thousands and thousands of years. They are much larger than many of the other tribes that we've talked about, with around 35,000 people. There are Yanomami people who are in minimal contact, although they still maintain their traditions and way of life. They live in communal houses that can hold up to 400 people, and they strongly believe in equality with no chiefs or leaders, but instead teachers and shamans. Because of the contact they have had, however, there have been outbreaks of diseases such as malaria, tuberculosis, and influenza. These are fatal to their communities as they of course have no immunity built up. Some of these outbreaks first occurred in the 1970s, and the tribe is still struggling to contain them. In 7 years, more than 20% of the tribe passed away from this, combined with the conflict over the land that they live on. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Awa. The Awa are a group of people living in the eastern Amazon rainforest. There are around 350 living members, but not all of them remain uncontacted. Out of the 350, it is believed that around 100 members continue to try and remain uncontacted, although it unfortunately hasn't been as easy as it should be for them. The Awa were once settled people, but they began to live a more nomadic lifestyle around the 1800s in order to try and escape incursions by the Europeans. They were further threatened by settlers who cleared out most of the forests on their land. In 1982, the Brazilian government received a loan of $900 million from the World Bank and the European Union, but under a condition that the lands of certain indigenous peoples, including the Awa, would be protected. This should have been the key to helping protect these peoples, considering their lives were continually being threatened. There were many cases of tribes people being killed by settlers, and the forest on which they depended was being destroyed by logging and land clearance for farming. Unfortunately, it took the government over 20 years to actually act on this condition, and finally, in March of 2003, the Awa's land was finally distinguished. And to make matters a little worse for these people, there are always people who won't respect their land, no matter what laws are in place. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Taromenane. Remember a couple of points ago how the Tagari, how I mentioned that they were one of the last 2 uncontacted tribes in Ecuador? Well, this is the last one. These people live on the Yasuni National Park in the Ecuadorian Amazon basin, and this tribe also has some distinct relations to the Huaorani people. There is estimated to be around 150 to 30 people in this tribe who maintain their nomadic lifestyle in the rainforest. While, like everyone else on this list, 2 of their main threats are oil development and illegal loggers, these guys have another, more unexpected threat, and that is the Huaorani. In 2013, more than 20 of this tribe were killed by other Huaorani, which left 2 child survivors who were taken as hostages. Apparently, the people who took part in this terrible tragedy bragged about it on national television at first, calling themselves braves for attacking and taking the lives of unarmed people with rifles, pistols, and long spears, and even went as far as selling photos of it to the highest bidder. There is so much to cover in regards to this one incident that I unfortunately just don't have time for, but the whole situation is extremely tragic and just downright horrible. Much of these disputes stem from the land that they share because of the fact that this tribe has been pushed deeper into the forest from the Huaorani, allowing oil companies to drill on the land. It is of course a very complicated issue that has so much more to it. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Toromona. The Toromona are a group of people who are indigenous to Bolivia, and they live near the upper Madidi River, which is a part of the Amazon basin, and the Heath River in the northwestern area of Bolivia. There hasn't been any notable contact with this tribe aside from other indigenous indigenous tribes, but this tribe was talked about a lot when a Norwegian biologist searched specifically for the tribe for many years before he mysteriously disappeared in the region of the Madidi Park in 1997. This tribe has remained quite isolated, and the most recent known sighting in the 21st century was when the Aorona people of Bolivia informed an anthropologist named Michael Brohan that they had contacted a group that was in voluntary isolation on the eastern bank of the Manarini River. It wasn't confirmed that this was the Toromona tribe, but it is believed that that's who they saw. Thankfully, in 2006, Bolivia's administrative resolution created an exclusive, reserved, and untouchable portion of the Madidi National Park in order to protect the Toromona and their desires to be uncontacted. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Carafayana. The Carafayana are an extremely small group of only about 50 people who remain extremely uncontacted. Because of this, there is very little information available about them. They are located within the Amazon regions of Brazil, so like many of the other tribes that live in the area, they are threatened by illegal logging, oil companies, and destruction of their land. It is believed that they practice a religion that is based on other living creatures and things around them, such as plants and animals, but the specifics of this remain very much a mystery. They are a nomadic group of hunter-gatherers, and it is unclear if they partake in any kinds of agriculture or horticulture. While it would be of course super interesting and great to know more about this tribe and the people, it is kind of refreshing to hear about a tribe we know so little about because they mostly have just been left alone. Of course, that doesn't mean the outside world has been great to them, but just maybe less worse. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Sapanawa. The Sapanawa are a group living in the uncontacted frontier, which is the area of land that straddles the borders of Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil, and is the home to more uncontacted tribes than anywhere else on Earth. A group of Sapawana people recently made contact in 2014 because of the fact that their homes were attacked and burnt to the ground by outsiders. So many of their people passed away in this brutal attack that they were unable to bury them all. This all stems from the lack of punishment that has been given to illegal loggers and drug smugglers in the region, as well as all the missionaries in the area who are careless when it comes to spreading the diseases that we may have built up an immunity to, but the same cannot be said for these uncontacted tribes. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Moxitetu. These people are one of the last remaining uncontacted tribes that are a part of the Yanomami people. They have all the similar traditions and values, and the Yanomami people who are in contact have reported seeing them before. They also explained that they are living in the area of the forest with the highest concentration of illegal miners, which poses many threats to their way of life. Not only are these miners bringing the potentially fatal diseases that we've discussed, but there of course will also be major and deadly conflict if the tribe comes in contact with the miners. The mining not only harms the land they live on, but the miners use high-powered hoses and mercury to extract the gold, which then pollutes the rivers and the forest. Most of the mining is illegal in the first place, and near gold mining sites, the plants and animals surrounding them have been found to have extremely high levels of mercury contamination. With these plants and animals being the only source of food for this tribe, this mining is also increasing their chance of severe health problems due to the contamination. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Sentinelese. The Sentinelese are the tribe who inhabit North Sentinel Island in the Bay of Bengal in the northeastern Indian Ocean. They have actively resisted any contact from the outside world and are known to kill anyone who tries to trespass on their land. In 1956, the government of India declared the island a tribal reserve and prohibited any travel within 3 nautical miles of the island, which truthfully is for the best. It is unclear how many people are in the tribe, but it is estimated to be between 15 to 500 people, with somewhere around 50 to 200 being the most likely. The Sentinelese are hunter-gatherers, and they use bow and arrows to hunt wildlife and as well to catch local seafood. As of right now, it isn't believed that they take part in agriculture, but it is tough to say as we of course cannot really get a look inside their ways of life. The first peaceful contact was made with the Sentinelese in 1991, but visits to the island stopped in 1997, and that is probably the right thing. While it would be amazing to know more about this tribe and their ways of life, the feeling clearly isn't mutual, so the right thing would be to just let them live their lives the way they want.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Sentinelese. These are the indigenous people of North Sentinel Island located in the Bay of Bengal. They have resisted contact contact with the outside world for as long as the outside world has even known about them. They are a hunter-gatherer population that have shown no signs of developing agriculture or even producing fire. In 1996, the Indian government ended all contact attempts following a series of hostile encounters resulting in several deaths. In 2006 alone, 2 fishermen were killed by tribal archers there when their boat drifted too close to the island. The tribe's population is unknown. Next up at number 9 now, we have Survival International. That's not the name of the tribe, obviously. That's the name of the group that took these incredible pictures of an uncontacted tribe in the Brazilian Amazon. The helicopter was flying over a clearing near the Envira River when they saw this: a man and some children staring up at them in wonder. He's armed with a bow and arrow and covered in red paint made from the seeds of the anato shrub. When the pictures were posted online on the group's website, they were being viewed thousands of times per minute, captivating people all over the world. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Man of the Hole. This is one man who lives alone in the Amazon rainforest and is believed to be the last surviving member of his tribe. Some people refer to him as the last tribesman or the loneliest man on earth, but he is known as the Man of the Hole because he makes holes. Wherever his abandoned homes are found, there is always a hole inside them, over 6 feet deep. It's thought he uses these holes to trap animals or for him to hide in. His existence wasn't even known until 1996. In 2007, the Brazilian government made an off-limits area around him. That area currently sits at over 42 square miles. In 2009, the Man of the Hole was attacked by gunmen, but is believed to have survived. Not much more is known about him. Alright, at number 7 now, we have the New Guinea tribes. Now these are a large number of different tribes on this Indonesian island that we know almost nothing about. One study found there are an estimated 44 uncontacted tribal groups there. Large parts of the area are unexplored by scientists and anthropologists because of all the difficult terrain. It seems to be the case there that local authorities are aware of where the tribes are, but not very much more than that. Very little is known about their language, population, and whether contact is even the right thing to push for. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Awa. Also known as the Gawaya, this indigenous group live in Brazil's eastern Amazon rainforest. Their population is thought to be around 350, spread out among a number of smaller subgroups. Now about 100 of those people have had no contact with the outside world. They are a nomadic group, which means they wander from place to place, a trait they appear to have developed to stay one step ahead of colonial Europeans. They have had serious conflicts with loggers, leading to massacres, with some accusing the Brazilian government of turning a blind eye. This led to one human rights organization to label them as Earth's most threatened tribe. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Javari Valley people. Now this isn't their name, we don't actually know their name, but Javari Valley in Brazil is where an uncontacted tribe had a brutal run-in with illegal gold miners. In September 2017, an estimated 10 members of the tribe were killed while gathering eggs along the valley's river. We only know this happened because the miners then went to a bar to brag about the killings, showing off a hand-carved paddle as proof of their deed. The event caused outrage across the world, but for local activist groups trying to protect these local tribes, this sadly comes as no surprise. Alright, at number 4 now, we have the Ao Rio. There are a number of different clans that make up the Ao Rio group, although they all originate from the Gran Chaco area that spans both Bolivia and Paraguay. Some of these clans have assimilated into the modern world around them, with notable problems for them, I might add, but some of them remain in voluntary isolation. It's thought there are about 100 uncontacted Ao Rio members split into about 6 or 7 groups. They're actually the only uncontacted South American tribe not living in the Amazon. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Toromona. These are an uncontacted tribe living in northwest Bolivia. They've been known about for quite some time, but it wasn't until 2006 that the Bolivian government created an established zone of protection for them. There has not been a single non-native person to contact this tribe. This is quite surprising because many parts of Bolivia were settled by the Spanish during their colonization of the area. However, they found it difficult to settle in this particular area of the Amazon, and so the Toromona were free to develop uncontacted. At the number 2 spot now, we have the Yuqui. This group of indigenous people from eastern Bolivia have been known about since the colonial era, but in all that time, contact has been hard to come by. For hundreds of years, people thought the Yuqui were actually part of another, larger group known as the Siriono. So, in 1960, an attempt to contact them was made by a Siriono speaker. When it failed, anthropologists realized they were much more of a distinct group. As of today, it's thought that the Yuqui tribe consists of 49 families, 35 of which are contacted and 14 are not. And finally at number 1 now we have the Mascopero. This group is one of Peru's 15 uncontacted tribes, but things may not stay the same forever. In November 2017, the Peruvian government announced plans to initiate contact with this tribe. The main reason for this is because the Mascopero have been raiding other contacted villages, sometimes killing residents and pillaging their supplies. There is also the worry that tourists and companies may start making contact with them soon anyway. All of this means the government has decided to step in first and make official contact. At the time of recording this video, it's yet to be seen if the contact will be successful.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Oseberg ship. This Viking vessel was built to be either sailed or rowed, and what made it such a fascinating discovery is the fact that it is very ornate and detailed, but it has also been preserved exceptionally well. It dates back to around the year 820 and it was found in a large burial mound in 1904. Like I mentioned, this was a Viking vessel, and for anyone who isn't familiar, the Vikings were an ancient warrior tribe from Scandinavia, and they are known to have conducted raids in different parts of both Eastern and Western Europe. The Oseberg ship is definitely one of the finest artifacts to ever be recovered from this era. In our number 9 spot today we have the Antikythera mechanism. In the very early 1900s, researchers found an ancient computer just off of a Greek island. This mechanism remains on display at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens because it is honestly unbelievable. This analog computer may have had a ton of uses, and researchers aren't 100% sure about all of the ways it was used, but it is known to have been some sort of an astronomical calculator. It was able to predict eclipses and different planetary placements, and it was found 45 meters below the water in the wreck of a ship. This mechanism has been dated back to somewhere around 87 BC, and it is thought to have been created by the Corinthians at the time. Because of the uncertainty and mystery surrounding it, it is possible that this mechanism comes from another colony of ancient Greeks, but at this moment, with the knowledge and evidence we have, this is the best guess. In our number 8 spot today we have the Corinthian helmet. Another artifact coming from the Corinthians of ancient Greece, we have a helmet. This would still be a great discovery if it was just a regular old helmet, but it is even better because of what lay inside. This helmet is from the Battle of Marathon, which happened in 490 BC, and this discovery gives us some pretty incredible insight into the protective armor that was worn at the time, what it was made out of, and even how it was created. The helmet was recovered in Greece in 1834, but here's where things get a lot more exciting. Within the helmet, they found the skull of the person who passed away while wearing it. That is insane. I can't imagine how horrifying of a discovery that would be, but once the shock wore off, it is absolutely fascinating. It's not cool that someone lost their head, but it's just unbelievable how this sat there for thousands of years waiting to be discovered. I don't know, it's just cool. In our number 7 spot today we have Venus. Carved from mammoth ivory, this little discovery pushed back the history of female figurative art to 35,000 years ago. This discovery didn't come until 2008, and it was found in the Hohlfels cave in Germany. The figurine, like other Venus artifacts, clearly represents a woman's body, although it's a little elaborate and exaggerated, with things like the arms, legs, and head being more of a suggestion. This figurine is actually the oldest undisputed example of a carving of a human being. Usually around this time, any art that depicted humans would have some sort of zoomorphic feature, so the fact that this one is strictly human is really a first. And I mean that quite literally. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I can't find the exact name or description of a tribe that this artifact belonged to, and I think that might be because no one really knows for sure. This artifact comes from prehistoric times in the late Stone Age, which is the era and time that had the earliest known evidence of organized settlements. In our number 6 spot today we have a Viking sword. Back with another Viking artifact, archaeologists found a Viking sword called Ulfbert that they were able to date back to somewhere from 800 to 1000 AD, but upon further research they were absolutely astounded at what they had found. This sword was made with a level of sophistication that wasn't seen until at least 800 years later. The carbon content of the sword is 3 times higher than other swords of the time, and due to the impurities that were removed, the iron ore would have needed to be heated to at least 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This sword was so hard to believe to researchers that a blacksmith named Richard Furrer made a sword similar to this one, and he used only technology that would have been available at the time of its making. He said that the process was the most complicated thing he had ever made, and he even ended up having to use methods that weren't known to be used at the time in order to recreate it. In our number 5 spot today, we have arts and crafts. About 100,000 years ago, a group of Homo sapiens found a cave that was on the coast of what is now South Africa, and it was here that they unloaded their gear, made a home for a short while, and started to work grinding iron-rich dirt and mixing it slowly with heated bone. They did this all in abalone shells, and it created a red, paint-like mixture that they then dipped a thin bone into, presumably to maybe paint something. Perhaps some sort of artifact, or maybe themselves. Either way, whatever they were painting, they ended up leaving the cave, but they left these little toolkits behind. Now, just 10 years ago, researchers found these paint kits still in the same cave, just now under a layer of dune sand. Not only did this discovery mark the oldest known example of humans making a compound mixture, but it's also the first known example of humans using a container, which is absolutely mind-blowing to think about. Study researcher Christopher Henshelwood, an archaeologist at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, said, quote, "To me, it's an important indicator of how technologically advanced people were 100,000 years ago. If this was a paint, it also indicates the likelihood that people were using substances in a symbolic way 100,000 years ago." While 100,000 years is a long time ago and this discovery is such an incredible find, it's wild to think about how that is really no time at all when we're talking about the history of the planet. It's definitely old in terms of human history though. That's for sure. In our number 4 spot today, we have an ancient cairn. This is probably the item that made me laugh the most while I was researching for this video, and it comes to us from 1750 BC. This is a clay tablet that features a letter written on it. The letter is written in Akkadian cuneiform, and it was sent to the ancient city-state Ur and was made by a customer named Nani, who was sending it to a merchant named Ia Nasir. Basically, this is the oldest known customer complaint letter. Imagine how much work this took. Like, they couldn't go online to a 24/7 chat and complain. They had to find a big ass stone tablet, carve out the logo-syllabic script, and then somehow get it delivered to the merchant. Like, that's a next level Karen right there. Basically, I guess this merchant guy would travel around selling his copper, and on one particular occasion he agreed to sell some to Nanny. Nanny sent his servant out with some money to pick up this copper, but when he got there it wasn't good enough quality, so he didn't end up buying it. So now Nanny was irritated and wanted to complain about the poor copper quality, and he complained that his servant was also treated rudely during this whole entire ordeal. He said that at the time of his writing he had not received any copper, but that he had paid the money for it. I don't know about you guys, but I kinda like the drama of ancient Mesopotamia. In our number 3 spot today, we have an ancient settlement. About 15 years ago, construction workers were digging up a spot during a project that was for the State Department of Transportation. It was then that they not only found hundreds of human remains, but they also found thousands of ancient artifacts. Turns out these workers accidentally stumbled upon and unearthed the remains of the largest indigenous settlement in the northwestern United States. From here, archaeological work was immediately conducted, and some 80,000 artifacts were recovered. This site is said to have been the home to the Lower Elwha Klalam tribe, which does still exist today. In 2014, after many years of discussions, 14 of these artifacts were handed back to the tribe, while the remaining ones were to be held at the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture, which is located in Seattle, for, quote, safekeeping. The tribe was able to select the artifacts that they would like to keep, which truly only seems fair, and they chose some of the most incredible of the entire selection. These include a comb made from bone that has carvings on either side, 2 blanket pins that have been carved into the shape of a fawn's head and a halibut, as well as some stones that have different stories or teachings in them. It is said that there were about 900 of these stones found in total, and no 2 feature the same story or lesson. These items were given back to the tribe in a very special ceremony, which is something that really is nice to hear. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Olmec colossal heads. The Olmec civilization has often been referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, and from somewhere between 1400 to 400 BC, the civilization rose in the Mexican Gulf Coast. Now, over 2 millennia later, in 1862, a farmer was digging that very same land that they once lived on and came across an extremely large stone head. From here, researchers continued, and this turned out to be one of 17 stone heads that are thought to have been portraits of the rulers from that time. The statues are all somewhere from 5 to 10 feet tall, but they are extremely heavy, like heavier than a full-grown elephant. I guess that's how we're now measuring weight. Some use imperial, some use metric, I use elephants. The reason it is believed that these stone heads were made to model rulers of the time is because they all share similar features, but they each are made with different expressions, slightly different facial features, and different headdresses. While the first discovery of the stone head was close to the source of the basalt stone that was used to make them, most of the heads are like 60 miles away from there. So we have absolutely no idea how these ancient people were able to make these stones. We just know it wasn't an easy task by any means. In our number 1 spot today we have the stolen artifacts. This story is a little bit different than the others on this list today, but I came across it and felt compelled to include it because I think it's very interesting, but also very important. The Chugach tribe, which is indigenous to Alaska, has a very rich history, but in our modern times, a lot of the ancient artifacts from the tribe are all they have left, if they weren't stolen right from their hands. This tribe has lived in the Prince William Sound area for thousands of years, and many of the stories and traditions of the tribe and its origins have been passed down orally through generations. While these stories are an exceptionally important part of the culture, like anyone can understand, artifacts also have a very important place and can show the ancestors' ways of life. In the early 1800s, an explorer stole from the tribe 9 ancient artifacts that included burial masks and a cradle, and for years these items were stored in a museum all the way in Germany. These objects are sacred and have a strong spiritual significance to the tribe, but they also just weren't that explorers for the taking, regardless of their significance. Since the 1800s, the tribe has been working to have these artifacts returned to them, and finally, just a few years ago, they were. This was so tumultuous because while in the US there are some laws in place to protect indigenous artifacts, those laws don't exist in Europe. John Johnson from the Chugach Alaska Corporation says that he believes that the museum gained 100% knowledge by returning the artifacts and actually engaging with the tribes. He made a very valuable point. While it's nice for the museum to have stolen artifacts sitting in a box for hundreds of years, it's actually way more valuable to hear real accounts from the tribe and engage with them. You'll learn a lot more that way, that's for sure. Although these items should have never been stolen, the fact that they've been returned is now the most important part.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Chimbu Skeleton Tribe. One look at this tribe sends shivers down my spine, and if I saw them in the flesh, I would very much want to run away. It seems that the Chimbu tribe dressed this way for special festivals, including the Mount Hagen Festival. The paint was originally designed to psychologically intimidate enemies, and also to present themselves as superhuman. The tribe live in a remote mountainous region of Papua New Guinea and first made contact with the connected world in 1934, although they do remain elusive, and to be honest, painted like that, I wouldn't want to run into them. I wouldn't want to mess with them. Coming in at number 9, we have the Asaro tribe. Have a look at the Asaro tribe. Usually, I wouldn't say you should ever judge people by the way they look, but when it comes to tribes, I would say, actually, if they look threatening, that's because they want to scare you. They want to scare you off, and maybe you should be scared off. What happens if you don't heed that warning? Do you really want to find out? The Asaro tribe are also known as the Asaro Mudmen because of their masks, which are made from mud. They're also hella spooky. The story behind the mud is that one time they approached an enemy after hiding out in a muddy bank. The enemy thought that they were spirits and fled. Would you like to see them in action? The Asaro are actually pretty harmless, but their masks do make me worry. Coming in at number 8, we have the Chukchi people. The reason this tribe are on this list is because they are the only tribe in Russia that were never conquered by the Russian people, which actually must mean that they're pretty terrifying and hardcore. Historically, Russia has waged war with the Chukchi people on many occasions over hundreds of years. While some of the tribe's people were killed, they were never actually defeated. These days, they live reasonably undisturbed in the Chukchi Peninsula. This is at the very north of Russia, parallel to the top of Alaska. It is cold up there. These people survive in those climates 24/7, and to be honest, to me, that makes them pretty hardcore and not to be crossed. A ghost at number 7. We have the Night Marchers. I really enjoy this, something different for this list. Often called the Night Marchers, the Ho'akapo are ancient Hawaiian warriors that now are jobbed with escorting newly dead spirits into the afterlife. These are a more musical band of Grim Reapers. The Ho'akapo are also known as torchbearers, and they walk across the land carrying, you guessed it, torches, but also weapons and drums which they play and chant. There have been sightings of these ghostly torchbearers, but if you ever come across one, you must not look them in the eye, as they may mistakenly class you as someone who needs to be marched into the afterlife. That is, unless one of your relatives is in the tribe who can vouch for you. It's rules. Those are the rules. You know that the Ho'akapo are nearby if you hear distant drumming in Hawaii, if you hear conch shell horns, see faint torchlight and smell faint foul odours. Rumours and reports of torchbearer sightings have been rife over the years and are absolutely ingrained in Hawaiian folklore. Unless you want to be marched down into heaven or hell or wherever they're going, I would say stay away from the tribe. Coming in at number 6, we have the Korubo or the Desala tribe. The Korubo, also known as the Desala tribe, are well known for their big clubs, as in big sticks. The Korubo are one of the most isolated tribes in the world, and they do not want to be contacted. The tribe are visually scary to look at. They paint themselves with red dye made from the ruco plant. The tribe lives in the western Amazon basin and regularly have clashes with other local tribes. They use their clubs to beat people to death. They're also fond of the humble poison dart. The tribe are hostile to outsiders, and in recent history they have beat to death 3 loggers and workers from Funai, a Brazilian government initiative to protect indigenous tribes. Coming into number 5, we have the Surma tribe. The Surma live in the Bench Magi zone of the southern nations, nationalities and peoples regions of Ethiopia. The tribe are particularly scary and dangerous, especially if you're an outsider like us, because instead of clubs, spears or darts, the bands have automatic guns. Yikes. Guns aside for the moment, the tribe do have a tradition of beating one another with sticks as a rite of passage before they can officially become a man, so as you can gather, the Surma don't shy away from violence. While the Surma do have guns and are hostile to outsiders, there aren't actually any reported instances of them shooting anyone, so I guess while things may seem barbaric to us, who are we to judge them? They probably just want to do their own tribe business and let us leave them alone. Coming in at number 4, we have the Angori sect. The Angori sect are infamous for their morbid worship practices. Now, they use a corpse during their rituals, and they often threaten to eat people. Have a watch of a CNN reporter interacting with them. Honestly, this freaked me out. Can you imagine being in this situation?
People on that side of the river are so afraid of the Agori.
That's right, he actually said that. I'd be terrified. The reporter then starts asking questions which are not met with a happy response. Have a listen.
Why do
Wow! I absolutely think I'd be bricking it. The sect are very secretive and they generally shy away from interactions with others, and honestly, that's enough to make me want to stay away from them. Okay, next up, not 100% a tribe, but like a terrifying story and a terrifying jungle gang in Papua New Guinea. At number 3, we have the Cargo Cult. This is such a scary story. The story starts with Stephen Tarry, a man who gathered thousands of disciples in Papua New Guinea. He lured them into the jungle and encouraged them to be part of his sect. The man wore white robes and preached his own gospel while standing on a rock and calling himself, and I quote, Black Jesus. The cult lived in the jungle much like a tribe, and Tari was their leader. He would regularly lead ritual human sacrifice, which is repugnant. On one occasion, he slaughtered a virgin he called his flower girl and encouraged his following to drink her blood. One mother testified that she was made to drink her own daughter's blood. Now it seems that the tribe-like cult turned against him, and actually the leader was murdered himself in 2013. I guess he got what was coming to him. Okay, at number 2, I've put a tribe you've probably heard of, and I'm saving one at number 1 that you might not have heard of. Getting a lot of press, we have the Sentinelese tribe. So you may have heard of this tribe in regards to the recent murder of John Allen Chow. He was a 26-year-old American missionary who was sent by the All Nations group to make contact and live with amongst the tribe. Basically, they were hoping to convert them to Christianity, which really wasn't a good idea because they killed him. This as is the theme with people who come too close to this tribe. Now, the North Centennial Island is amid the Indian Ocean and has been home to the tribe for around 60,000 years. Until recently, the tribe has only been spotted through far-off images. But people keep getting closer and closer to them these days, and they don't like it. They've been known to fire arrows at low-flying planes. It's hard to contact a tribe who have literally no interest in communication, but most of those who have tried just haven't lived to tell the tale. Some have met their fury by accident. For example, in 2006, 2 fishermen who were illegally harvesting crabs were killed by the tribe. Now, Chow, the missionary, is the most recent victim. He kept a journal of his attempts to contact the tribe, and he sang songs and offered them the Bible, but actually, instead, they shot and pierced the holy book with an arrow. I think this should have been a warning to him, but he persisted to no avail and was met with a mixture of laughter and hostility. In the end, it all got too much for the tribe, who decided to kill him. He was last seen by the crew who went with him on the adventure. He was dragged away. They said they saw him dragged away and killed, and they saw his lifeless body spotted on the shore. Gnarly. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the Korowai tribe. The Korowai tribe are one of the most feared tribes in the world. They were only discovered in 1974, and since then, encounters have been very limited. The tribe are based in Papua New Guinea, and they are known to live in trees as to have a height advantage when intruders come into their space. They are known to shoot arrows at any trespassers, and they believe that white people are actually possessed by ghosts or demons, so obviously as a white person wandering into this tribe, you can imagine what might happen to you. It is actually thought that the Korowai tribe killed Michael Rockefeller, who disappeared after attempting contact in the 1960s. Some reports say that his body was seen amid the tribe on a beach. Now, in 2014, Australian journalist Paul Raphael visited the tribe and discovered that they do still very much eat people. That's right, they cannibalize the body of people who die under mysterious circumstances. Why? Because they think that they've been possessed by a kakua. A kakua basically is a bad spirit. The logic is they must eat the kakua as the kakua ate the person who died. It's an act of revenge. Everything is eaten by the tribe except the hair, nails, and penis. Do you want to stumble across this tribe? Rather you than me.